Good morning and good evening to everyone from all parts of the world who have registered for the webinar which we are having today. Hope you and your family are doing safe in COVID times. Our best wishes with all of you. Now to begin with, let me introduce myself and the company to you. My name is Nitin Naveen and
So I guess, Nitin is having some challenges with his connectivity. We'll take it over from there. Hello, guys. I think I'm Karthik Gajjar. I work with Ericsson, been into digital transformation for pretty long time, putting, the old system to new system. And along with that, lately I've been also part of some of the AI initiative driven at Ericsson. We are bringing some of the innovation in a way to the consumer to help with various need of the telecom operators. Quick introduction. So I'll move down to Uma, who's one of our esteemed colleague and also into telecom industry. Uma, if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Karthik. Hey, Uma Parvati, Managing Director from Accenture, based out of Washington, D.C. here, and I globally lead the AI-powered solutions for comms and media industry within Accenture. And for the last decade, my focus has been digital transformation. How do we bring AI-powered solution to marketing, sales, and customer care, every touch point for the consumers and B2B? And now we are looking at how to grow the B2B with some of these innovative kind of technologies and engagements.
Thanks, Uma. Christensen, I see you there. If you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Jerry Christensen, and I'm with a company called Umail. We've got two parts of the business. One part is a smartphone-based app that helps stop unwanted robocalls. And I'm involved with the other part of the business where we take data as a result of stopping those robocalls and help carriers and the enterprise ecosystem also mitigate the effects of unwanted robocalls.
Oh, thanks, Christensen. Really great to hear that. Davis, if you would like to go next, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, Gary Davis. I'm actually with a company called Sandler Partners. And we're a little different here on the panel. I'm not actually part of an individual vendor type or a supplier. We actually represent about 200 different suppliers. We're actually a technology services distribution company offering services, anything from telecommunications to cloud to data center to voice to contact centers to cybersecurity. And I'm actually the VP of engineering here on the East Coast and looking forward to talking with everybody. And again, like I said, we represent a whole range of options within our portfolio that our sales partners go out and in turn offer that to end customers like yourself on the phone today.
Excellent. Appreciate it, Davis. I think, today we have a challenge and we all face this, day in day basis where somebody is unable to connect and some connectivity goes down. And that shows the precise, the criticality of having that telecom in place. We are so much dependent on it. And we need it on a day-to-day basis, and specifically during the COVID era. I mean, without we as a telecom providers or telecom industry, it would have been a very dire situation. Now, we do have one more guest speaker. Currently, he is facing some challenges, so let's see how it goes. However, what we need to do, I think I'll proceed here. So, as a telecom, as an industry, historically it has been between man and machine, like anything, and that we have been fueling the communication. We have been allowing people to communicate, and we are allowing so many things to connect. And lately, with the AI coming in, there are so many aspects to it which can improve even further. So, with that in mind, it is going to help industry grow in various areas, allow and create way more challenges, create way more opportunities, more employment, more dependency. Having a complex infrastructure, having a complex telecom solution is one thing, and keeping it running is another thing. So we have panels here all the way from all the areas, and let's see how AI is going to benefit all of us. So one of the most important area is, when we go AI, I mean, what is that we are bringing in for the end consumer? How a customer gets benefited out of all this AI. Some of the obvious observations are, as an end consumer, you have some challenges. How do you overcome it? So for a CSP or communication service provider, you need some mechanism. So it could be something, when a customer is complaining, are we able to predict it proactively? Are we creating some of the solution which resolve this problem proactively? Also, all in this area, I think that sets us an area where we should focus on how we can improve the customer experience. So, Uma, what's your viewpoint on this area?
It's a very interesting topic because if you look at the last decade, the customer expectations have dramatically changed, right? The comms and media industry is not different at all, right? And the industry boundaries are blurring as well, right? Our consumers are really tech savvy, well informed, and they're open to exploring new ideas. It's all about what products and solutions those better might need, right? They're not looking at the definition of loyalty has changed dramatically. So the telcos, if you look at it, they are facing the competition, not just with their peers, they have to even look at the adjacent kind of industries as well, right? The consumers are becoming accustomed to the digitally driven experiences such as Netflix and YouTube, offering an on-demand kind of consumption around the clock. That's the expectation we are seeing from the consumer now. The perception has changed, right? But the telcos, in order to be successful, they really need to start reimagining that process. But the challenge they have is their legacy technology-driven process, right, in the back end. So how do we kind of pivot from what they have in the back end and the traditional kind of the billing system-oriented kind of operations, right? But there is an opportunity for the telcos to transform their offerings through the new kind of technologies, right? If you think about it, using the right layers of technology, such as cloud and AI-powered virtual assistants that run on the data and analytics, how they can bring innovation to the customer experience. That is the route we are seeing most of our clients are taking, right? But in order to, I think they need to start delivering a truly kind of differentiated customer experience in order to be successful. This is where the AI and advanced analytics come into play. It helps them to understand kind of the customer behavior and proactively kind of predict the customer needs instead of waiting for them to come to the channels to touch base with them, right? So the contextualized customer experience at every touch point is the recipe for success, right? That's where the AI and analytics would come into play. And the studies have shown that customer experience will definitely take over the pricing and product as the key brand differentiator, right? And even provide them the competitive kind of edge, right? It's all about engagement, especially on the consumer side. The products are becoming really a commodity, right? How do you differentiate? It's really about knowing the customer and providing them, even before they come to you, understanding them with the right kind of the services. So I think it's a very interesting one to see kind of how the industry kind of blur across and how the engagement, I would call the customer engagement more than the experience.
Excellent. So very good insight, Umar. I clearly see, from moving from system of record focus to all the way to experience, it really brings amazing value. So Christian, what's your opinion on it? How we can improvise, customer experience from your point of view?
So this is a great place to start. I know we're going to hit on about 6 different topics that involve AI, but I would say that customer service is a great place to start. And the reason for that is, just kind of starting off at the 50,000 foot level view, it's important to recognize that most AI systems today are very purpose built. And it kind of fits in with what Uma just said, that, if we're constrained by those back-end systems, like she mentioned, which we are, then the purpose-built systems are a good place to start. And so from a customer service perspective, we've seen some of those things implemented already in customer care, for example. Some of them can be downright annoying. You call a number and you know that you're talking to a computer, right? Some of those areas are going to improve through advancements like conversational AI, where it sounds more like a human being, and some of it's more like natural conversation and pauses and things like that. So it sounds like you're talking to a human being. But also some of the advancements are going to come where things go from being purpose-built to more general purpose AI. And from a systems integration perspective, some of these areas are tied together so that you can have some more meaningful outcomes. So, for example, AI is also being deployed in network management. So if you could tie those two things together, where when you call or you make a contact with a complaint or a concern, and the network already anticipates what your concern might be, then it would be much more meaningful, a much better outcome, a much more pleasant experience. You might be more willing to sit through that robotic voice or that conversational AI where, you're talking to a computer, but you know that it actually is anticipating what your interests and your concerns are. So I definitely see us moving in that direction with more cohesive use of AI across different systems. But it's going to be a journey though to get there, because like Uma is saying, there are definitely constraints there today, but there's going to be a need to tie all these different systems together.
Thanks, Christensen. From all the way from the network and how the intelligence will build. Davis, maybe you can give your viewpoint of how how all this various suppliers, how they are trying to bring in AI to improve all the experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's kind of critical is the customer experience. I think that's a story that a lot of our partners, a lot of our suppliers are telling that story today and using a lot of technology, especially artificial intelligence and machine learning and some of those avenues in order to help create a better experience for their end customers. Like, for instance, today we work a lot with contact center providers. Again, a lot of those guys actually go out and use artificial intelligence to help automate a lot of processes. As Jerry Christensen mentioned a minute ago, a lot of those can do chat bots and virtual chat sessions and things like that, and automate a lot of that, which obviously going to save a lot of money on the back end side, because now it's reducing labor costs. But at the same time, if I'm a guy calling in and just need a quick, simple answer, then I don't necessarily have to spend 20 minutes trying to weed through an IVR of some sort to figure out what the answer is. So if I can just speak to an AI type bot and it kind of figures out what I need and deliver that back real quickly and effectively, I've saved 20 minutes of my day having to wait through and sift through a large IVR tray. I think all of us been kind of through IVR, purgatory before. And so kind of understanding that, and that's getting much, much better results. But automating a lot of those processes. I think the other piece a lot of times is a lot of us from a consumer perspective. I think, Uma, you hit on this a little bit. It has changed dramatically. We're used to the Amazon experience at this point, right? We're used to almost the machines understanding and almost predicting what we need when we need it. I mean, how many times, all of us out in the audience, how many times we got an email that says, hey, I think you ought to purchase this, or I think this is what you like. Or we're on Spotify and it says, I think these are the songs you probably want to listen to. You haven't listened to them before, but oh, by the way, just, based on what you've also listened to before, it's using this artificial intelligence on the back inside to make intelligent decisions about what my preferences are. Or again, I'm on a call with a contact center agent. So I'm calling in about something, just kind of figuring out what my persona is, what I like, maybe what my previous order was. Is it anticipating that maybe I've had issues there? Or is it anticipating, for instance, maybe if I raise my voice and say things louder, that maybe I'm a little bit ticked off. And so maybe somebody else needs to jump in there and figure out that maybe, again, just understanding what that sentiment is and kind of intervening for me and understanding what those needs are. And then the other piece too is a lot of cases what we're seeing a lot of our suppliers is even the ability to actually take all the call recordings, or as you're live on a call, it actually understands and transcribes a call real time and actually says, what, I just mentioned your competitor to you. And therefore, it has a coaching session that comes up and says, well, maybe, for instance, Mr. Agent, you need to slow down and actually mention these key points about how we're better than they are, or other areas, for instance. Or maybe it understands my sentiment and says, Gary's now not really happy, so therefore maybe need to slow down. And again, coaching sessions. So again, kind of giving that human touch involved in that as well, which I know we'll speak on a little bit later. But again, all those things together, definitely can provide a much better customer experience overall. And AI is being used tremendously in that space. So.
Thanks, David. So, it's so amazing that telecom is sitting in an area where, we either, on one side, we are talking with literally network, on the other side, we are almost like a, e-commerce system on the other side. We have all the opportunity to, improvise, reducing the call wait, bringing in all the intelligence to speed up the provisioning, speed up the customer expectation, and that's just something mind-blowing. And even if you just hear this last few minutes, I mean, the amount of thing which we will be able to achieve by introducing and focusing on AI, it is really going to bring us to a very next level. So, Greg, your thoughts? We cannot hear you. If you would like to check your mute button, please. Nope, not yet. So, since we can hear you and see you, I cannot blame the telecom, at least.
It's another good AI app. We should be able to read his lips and transcribe what he's saying.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's also an interesting use case already. This is, and it is actually real, when we think, there's as a practical options. So I think, Greg, let's see, if you can find a way to reconnect, and we turn back to you, and we'll just talk to you again. So maybe you want to reconnect. No worries. Appreciate it, Greg. So now, when we bring all this technology and everything in place, telcos and all of us also need to survive, and we need to create some business use case out of it, right? I mean, if you are not making business, I think we need to justify that business, and that's where the cost of ownership comes in. Telcos are, not like the one which we used to be in 2 decades before, where, the ARPUs were very high. People were making, tons of money, and, the stock prices were great. Now it has, it is becoming more of a commodity, and with, lots and lots of OTT provider, again, depending on telco, but that leverage is getting reduced day by day. And that's where, how an AI can really help improve the total cost of ownership for a telco. It could be, all the areas which we just discussed. It could be something new. So, Christensen, if you want to go first this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things that AI does is it provides optimization of outcome-based objectives. And that's really important. If you think about TCO, total cost of ownership, you're thinking about efficiency and effectiveness. And, one of the biggest things that AI is going to help with is reduce the cost for human beings, because typically the human cost is the highest line item for most organizations. So that's why we see, for example, robotics coming into McDonald's. And, it's the same for telecommunications. AI, I mentioned earlier, in network optimization, that helps to reduce the number of headcount that you need for ops folks. And it also just makes them more effective as well. So basically, better decision making, reduce cost for resources. But another big one that people perhaps don't talk about enough is fewer mistakes, because mistakes, little or big, are a problem for any organization. But for telecommunications, if it's a big mistake, you can lose millions of dollars or even billions of dollars in a few seconds, especially for some of your more important customers. We're kind of joking around here about having bandwidth problems with Greg and so forth. But, if you have a latency dependent type thing like virtual reality, or if you have a high-profile customer, like let's say high-frequency trading customer, they can't afford to have a disconnection, because if they do, they can literally lose billions of dollars, and that can hurt the reputation of a telecom operator. So if AI can be used to anticipate where problems may arise and redirect resources and therefore reduce mistakes and lost opportunities. That is definitely a good example of how you can keep your TCO low. And I'm sure my esteemed colleagues can mention many others.
Yeah, thanks, Christensen. I mean that's the day in day out, right? So in any telecom operation, it's really challenging to have this thing under control. I think we have a live example going on. If we are able to predict that, if we are able to dynamically allocate bandwidth or fix the latency issue, I mean that's where you have a way better customer experience. So anyone having that edge over the competitor is definitely going to win. And on top of it, we are bringing 5G, and we are just keep on increasing the customer expectation. And if we don't deliver on it, I think that will be a bigger challenge. So, Davis, would you like to have? What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Total cost of ownership, it's either return on investment or total cost of ownership. Those are definitely keywords that you have to absolutely address when it comes to implementing any sort of technology, right? There has to be some sort of payback for that. And so sometimes, because we just talked about customer experience and improving customer experience, sometimes there's indirect costs or even indirect customer avoidance that you're not even aware may have been saved with AI. For instance, you may improve the experience such that you retain more customers, and you're able to maybe attract new customers. So it's hard to measure in all cases, but certainly AI is, as Jerry Christian talked a minute ago, certainly there's areas that certainly can be optimized. You can see clear definitions, clear return on that investment. So, for instance, in a contact center space, 70% of the actual cost is labor. It's not technology. It's actually the labor, people actually answering the phone. So if you can automate and have automated chat bots, things like that, and reduce the overall cost, you actually absolutely have a direct payback real quickly. But there's other things like that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about from an AI perspective, is even things like security programs, things like that. So if you take some of the security type products and services, a lot of those now are deploying AI type technologies built into those. So for instance, most of the time we think about even something simple like virus checking on individual laptops and desktops, right? We think about them having a virus signature. If we think about a firewall, it's looking for different types of activity. Typically in a past life, we thought about actually having a signature that says, if it looks like this and smells like this, then it's this virus or it's this issue that's occurring, right? Whereas nowadays what's happening, you hear about things like zero-day attacks and things of that nature where, using AI type technologies, it can actually identify anomalies in the traffic and say, you know what, this looks like this isn't right. And we're seeing Gary log in here in Charlotte, but also we're seeing him log in the West Coast, and he's sending traffic to China or he's sending traffic to other places across the world. And that's not usual for him. So therefore, we need to probably take action and stop that traffic from occurring. So even things like cost avoidance in the total cost of ownership type of discussion certainly plays a part, particularly in the telecom space. Or the other place I think we see a return on investment in some cases too is on telecom and connectivity out to the cloud environments, right? So many of us nowadays, it's not about on-prem type virtual servers. It's actually up in the cloud someplace. Whether it's Azure, with Microsoft, or maybe it's Amazon AWS or Google Cloud Platform. A lot of these places, have and control our data, right? So we generally have pipes up to those data centers that those things sit in. And so having one pipe you can reallocate, not to make fun of Greg right now since he's not on and he's having trouble connectivity, but rerouting and saying, right now, predictively, in this day of time, we generally see more traffic going to Azure than we do AWS. So let's automatically route more bandwidth to that particular cloud provider, for instance. So there's lots and lots of areas that we can see cost avoidance or even a total cost of ownership or return on that investment that we make in some of these technologies and can measure that very effectively. So.
Thanks, Davis. I think is an interesting insight. The edge computing and, the redundancy, it's a topic in itself. But, some of the challenges we all are facing nowadays is around attrition. And that's where, some of the, big challenges I'm sure everybody is facing here, either on this side or either you're not getting an opportunity or people receiving too many opportunity and we are losing people. So that's happening all over. And that's where, having a system, having more AI at least gives bandwidth to looking at positive side, people to focus on something what is more interesting and be innovative. At the same time, having that control and having that innovation in place for security, or be it, anomaly detection, or be it compliances. I think that's just keep on going to add value. So, Uma, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points where in the last decade, if you think about the AI, it has played a significant role looking at customer care, field operations, optimization, the network, right? It has been about how to improve the customer experience and how to kind of either avoid some of the support or even reduce the cost of operations, right? But when we think about the TCO for AI, I want us to pivot the thinking a little bit differently as well, right? Of course, the optimization and cost takeout is a major one. But as we go into the next decade, investments in the digital solutions such as this AI requires maybe more than the TCO assessment to justify, right? So the question is like where and how we can identify the economic benefits of AI beyond this cost reduction, right? The short answer is maybe we identify the new business models and experiences that AI is bringing, which the customers are getting, customers are adapting to it and expecting, right? Like last decade, if you think about it, we never expected Spotify to give me the list of songs I want to listen to. Now I'm looking for that service, right? That's a new business capabilities and services the customers are looking for. So how can we, in our TCO, start to think about the new capabilities, the business model, and the revenue stream AI can bring to us, right? And also, if you think about it, in order for the telcos to enable those services, they need to result in changes in their operations, right? The people process technology needs to change. It also changes the whole portfolio of products and solutions for them, right? Even the branding could change. While some of these type of asset changes may result in direct cost reduction, we should be looking at the new kind of business models and new kind of revenue streams and the economic benefits and how we can get closer to identifying new customers for the business, right? Those are some of the things I would think like as we pivot to the AI investment, make a holistic kind of approach to bring those, then we might be seeing much more value to the TCO.
No, thanks, Uma. You rightly said, the benchmark for telcos or the industry has been going up and up almost every day. Expecting, and the consumer is all exposed to all these amazing services, and they have the similar expectation from the telecom vendors, suppliers, and indirectly, one of us is supplying them, supporting them, or enabling them. This new normal is a very it's an opportunity where we either go and provide some capabilities or we work with that. Greg, let's see, if you're okay to speak. No, we can't hear you yet. I think, yeah. Thank you for being there. So if you have any specific comment, you can put it in and I can, just spell it out for you. That's fine. Give it an attempt on the chat window and I can take it from there. Perfect. Thanks, Greg. So I think one of the expectation of me as a, and consumer, when I lately observe this a lot, is so many robocalls, right? I mean, we have an expert in the room, but I want to share my frustration, when I'm on a call and amount of robocalls I receive, when you pick up, either they are not speaking anything, they are not, they start with some different languages. Sometimes they start with, immediately jump to, a topic where, they want to upsell you something. It has been frustrating. And I'm pretty sure it has been on the case on both sides. Here, there are two challenges. One, as a consumer, you are getting frustrated. At the same time, you, as a vendor, maybe you are the one providing the service. You really want to, target a customer who's really interested, right? So there is a there is an opportunity of an AI on both direction. I think it will be perfect to hear from Christensen. I think that's where you have a lot of information. Maybe you can share your viewpoint, Christensen, if you would like to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're jumping straight to robocalls and skipping data monetization for now?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure thing. These two actually kind of go hand in hand, so I'm going to touch on data monetization just very briefly. It's actually one of my favorite areas, and in fact, I wouldn't have a role at Umail if it was not for leveraging AI for data monetization. And I'll give you my perspective on that. So at a high level view, the way our system works is we leverage AI to be able to determine, first of all, is a call a robocall or not? And the way that we do that is we analyze the voicemails that are left behind by the bad guys, because the bad actors, they don't discriminate. They leave voicemails, they call everybody. Now, for a normal type of a situation where maybe you've got a honeypot out there that has a low capture rate, you might not actually get the audio from the bad guys, but we have a very high capture rate. So I think I should probably give you that info, first of all, just so you know. But as a result of that, we have the audio from the bad actors, and we have the audio for good calls. One of the common questions we get all the time is, Jerry, how do you avoid PII issues, personal information? Because obviously I don't want to be listening into Kartig's voicemail. So the way that we do that is we use AI to be able to distinguish at the machine level. We don't have to have human beings listen to these voicemails. At the machine level, we identify, is it a call from Jerry's wife saying pay the Citibank bill before it's past due? Or is it a robocall pretending to be Citibank, for example, and doing some type of phishing attack? So AI allows us to not only automate that and maintain privacy, because again, it's a machine doing this and not a human being, but also to do it at scale. And it also enables us, again, getting back to this data monetization, to take a whole bunch of raw data, the audio, which is digitized, and be able to make it into more meaningful information. Meaningful in the sense that we take that information, we categorize it, and we use it not only in our own app to block the robocalls, but we also categorize it in terms of, is it spam? Is it illegal because maybe it's violating TCPA or the do not call list? Or is it outright fraudulent? And that last category is really important. For example, we saw 150 million calls that supposedly came from Amazon, only it wasn't Amazon, because we know that Amazon doesn't place calls. So that's a really good example of, first of all, using AI to identify that it is a robocall, and then secondly, identifying it as fraudulent, because we know, deterministically speaking, Amazon doesn't place calls. So that's a form of brand impersonation. So things like that, to the extent that that can be leveraged, as opposed to other systems that might just look at things like how many calls did an entity make, could a human being place 20 calls in a second? Those kind of things are indicative of what might be happening, and they don't necessarily employ AI. They use analytics, but they don't use AI and machine learning like we do. So we feel that we've got a very innovative solution, and we're offering that to carriers in the enterprise ecosystem. Maybe some of Gary Davis's customers. We ought to talk after this, actually. So that's one example of using AI in telecommunications to make people's lives better. And Kartig, we definitely want to make your experience better where you're not getting those bad robocalls.
Oh, definitely. Also, Christensen, I think specifically, when you receive this call when you really don't want it, I think that's way frustrating. So I think what you're hitting is, literally the right pain point. And these are some of the areas where, we are going to bring in. And this some of the examples we are talking here. But this definitely gives a perspective, what as a consumer I need, or as a CSP, what they should be achieving. Obviously, there are even laws in place, or they are even bringing in more laws to prevent this robocall. This is like, the game of police and thief. More police get advanced, thieves are also getting advanced. So I think, the bad actors are really a tricky one to handle. But yes, a great insight. I think, Christensen, your product, I personally experienced it. I like that. So now, Davis, what's your, you're on both sides. You have a different kind of challenges. you as a consumer and you as a provider for the same kind of suppliers who really want to target a right set of people without, frankly speaking, frustrating anyone. So how do you see it helping out your area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll spend a couple of minutes on this. First, I'll go back real quickly again, going back to AI and data monetization. And again, I go back to the 2000s. We talked a lot about, data mining and big data and all those sort of terms. And, you go to the grocery store and you have to do the stupid little barcode, get scanned in. And it's been tracking data for us forever, it seems like. And I think Amazon was one of the first to actually use some of that data, actually upsell and provide additional services and things. And we see that with a lot of things we talked about a little bit earlier in order to make additional money off of those type of services. And going back to the previous panelist, Uma, talking about a new business model and be able to generate new revenue in areas that they just have never seen before. So creating new types of businesses that we've never seen before. And going back to the AI and robocall pieces and parts, I think that's what's interesting is yes, as a consumer, we don't want to receive those calls. We don't want to receive those calls, right? The do not call list and, creditors, things like that, calling maybe when they shouldn't be and things like that. So there needs to be certain legalities and certain laws put in place to make sure that the right people are calling and are able to call at the appropriate times within, say my life as a consumer, for instance. But it was kind of ironic, as we started this call this morning, on the pre-call, we talked a lot about, I actually have a current customer, a sales partner has a customer that's actually looking at, well, a lot of my calls are being blocked and I've got legitimate calls and reasons to be calling. And yet I can't get through because I'm being blocked and it's showing as potential spam on a cell phone or on a regular phone. And all of us, because if everybody gets one of those as potential spam on your cell phone, what do? You hit the ignore button, right? You never answer that. You'd be crazy to, right? So because of that, it's causing additional issues and concerns. And so one of the things that recently happened on the telco side is the FCC, for instance, recently came out with a new mandate called Stir Shaken. And I'm not sure if many have heard of that term or not, but basically STIR means Secure Telephone Identity Revisited, and of course signature-based handling of asserted information using tokens. So that's the shaken part. So STIR Shaken is kind of a method that a lot of the different UCaaS providers, a lot of the different voice providers on the telco side can actually use a signature to make sure that I am legitimately somebody. I'm not trying to create fraud. I'm not trying to do something illegal. I'm absolutely on the list. I have permission to do this. So there's methods put in place that a lot of the different providers now, the guidance of the FCC, is actually providing access so that when I place a call, I'm not put on that hey, I'm a spammer, so please don't answer me kind of list when you pop it up on a cell phone or up on your voice phone or whatever it might be. So the flip side of that is, they can use things like that in order to try and combat that and make sure that, again, I'm not a bad actor. So therefore, give me permission to make those calls like I should be able to. So I think that's the flip side. And I think, that's what we were talking about beforehand, me and Jerry Christensen were. So I think that's interesting, but.
Oh, that's interesting.
Can I elaborate? Kartik, could I elaborate on that further? I think it's so Gary Davis brings up some good points there, but I think it's important to recognize Stir Shaken and the connection to AI. So Stir Shaken is kind of like HTTPS on a website. You guys have gone to a website and you see the green bar. And what that means is that website is authenticated. It's genuine. You know that website actually belongs to Amazon. It's not a fake Amazon website. But let's say you went to a website that said HTTPS and you didn't recognize the company. You saw the green, you know that it was really the company, you know that they got a digital certificate for that website, but you don't recognize the company, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know what kind of behaviors they might exhibit, that particular website. So that's the big distinction there. Stir Shaken, all that does is it verifies to a certain extent whether the network and or the number are coming from the genuine source. So basically it prevents spoofing. But what it doesn't do is guarantee any type of behavior. So there's a good segue here to AI. You use AI, machine learning, and advanced data analytics to look at behavioral-based outcomes. So it's conceivable that somebody could be using Stir Shaken. And by the way, we see this all the time, where Stir Shaken is used, but it's still bad stuff that's happening. And I mean like really bad stuff like outright fraud. And then some of it's the gray areas. We've all received those car warranty calls. And some people say that's outright illegal. And then other people say, no, they're really selling the car warranty. So maybe it's an FTC issue and not an FCC issue, right? So there are gray areas. But AI is really, really good at reducing false positives on things that are outright fraud. And believe me, we've seen some of those even where stir shaking's in place. And that's only because we use AI. So I just wanted to point that out before we hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Christensen. I think this is, again, it's a very, dynamic area where, certain level of compliance is required. But at the same time, some innovation is required to ensure that, the legitimate actors are flagged accordingly because there's a business proposal they have. And if I might have gone and, subscribe for it, we do it and we forget about it. But on a seller side, I think they have a very legitimate reason to call you. So having that balance is going to be the future, and that's where the AI comes in place, and that's where as a consumer I expect, and as a provider I expect it to do it a very balanced job, and that brings a very it's a very delicate situation where AI is going to be the judge of so many things being done by human, and it will be an interesting area to discuss. And now with that, Uma, if you're, if you see possible, if you would like to add your comments there.
Yeah, I would just add a couple of things there. One, I was looking at the stats to see, because I do get that warranty call like at least once a week, and even if I disconnect, it's a different number coming in, so I can even trace it back to what number, right? I was looking at like the stats to see like how big is that issue, right? And I was looking at Umail. They did a survey and it showed like 4.9 billion calls just in the month of March this year, and which was like 6.8% increase in volume from the previous month. So I don't know what the number is now, 6 months down the lane, right? So it is a big issue. And more than that, what is happening is it's really undermining the consumer confidence in the CSP provider as well, right? I know many of our providers to put the guards and the blocks, that it's a very sophisticated one because it's a moving target. They are figuring out and it's changing. So it is not like a static solution for that. That's where really the AI power kind of power would come in, right? It's a continuous learning to understand, taking a look at your data, the spam camps, the calls coming in, and leveraging the company's own trained data and participating in some of the tracebacks that is happening in the industry to enable kind of a better and innovative solution as we go on, right? It is a dynamic kind of a solution that you need in order to really bring back the confidence of the consumer here.
Thanks, Uma. I think some of the things we are experiencing, some of them are already here, and good insight from Christensen. So another topic, we do all this, everything we do all this, and but now since the COP26 is going on, how we as a telecom or service provider, how we are going to use this AI to help potentially planet or help with sustainability, right? I mean, there is no apparent dependency on telecom. We don't do any of this really proactively, or we have no direct engagement. But how we can contribute to the sustainability side of it. The reason it's important is because of the future generation, and I mean, we are all are some or other way responsible, either as a consumer or as a provider. On the provider side, I think we believe that if we assume that we have not a lot to give, I don't believe it. Even when we are stopping some of the cars from going to some site and fixing some of the cell site, proactively fixing it, I think that's also kind of saving. When we bring in technology in place which saves some energy, that's also saving the plant. I mean, even on that small bit counts. So Uma, if you want to go first on this one.
Yeah, so there are some of the research that's done on the sustainability from an AI and the technology perspective, right? It shows that by 2030, the data center energy usage is set to surpass like 10% of the global electricity supply, right? Think about it. And the major component of that is really usage of the cloud-based AI, which is the building and the deploying the models, right? Which is the big part of it. Anyone who's deploying or scaling the AI today is really on the cloud. So those are the two components contributing to it. So we expect the platform of choice for developing and delivering the ML and AI services is going to be cloud. So it is important for us as we scale, how do we optimize it to make it better for the environment, right? One of the recent report we saw from OpenAI kind of shows that the compute used by the deep learning models has increased like 300,000 times in 6 years. So it is a compounding kind of factor, right? It's going to go up and up every 5 years, every decade we are going to look at, right? And it's the AI is a $330 billion industry, $1 billion industry, and making it sustainable while we are scaling is key because right now we are only scratched the surface. Think about all the data and the models we need to. We kind of propose a sustainable AI in the cloud. It's kind of a framework to think about it. It's like a carbon smart cloud-based machine learning framework for reducing the environment. And the whole concept of the approach is you measure, track, and optimize as you're building this model, right? Look for the energy efficient kind of practices, bring that into your framework, and is there any smart scheduling? Track that models which is consuming the energy so that you can shift the load to a more kind of renewable energy. So it's a framework to think about it as we are scaling the AI, right? And again, in the end, it's like, how do we move to a net zero CO2 emission? But there's a lot to unpack here, right? But everybody, like Karthik, you said, everybody is responsible. So as we scale and build, we need to think about the elements and what are the few optimizing and tuning we can do to get there.
Naturally, I think things which we cannot measure cannot be improved, right? So
Right.
that's where definitely comes in an area where how we can introduce this thinking by, as a supplier, we can talk about it, how it can benefit or how it is better, how it is trying to help with carbon neutrality, or we can, when we propose, I mean, it's a very challenging area. However, the data center which are more carbon neutral or getting more energy from, natural sources, I think these are some of the thought process can eventually evolve. And that it's a really good focus area to have an idea around it. So, Davis, would you like to have an opinion there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that's kind of interesting is we talk about AI a lot, and of course, Uma, you make a great point. Data centers is a big, huge source of energy consumption we don't normally even think about, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just kind of there, and there's huge numbers of data centers spread throughout the world. But yet, one of the things that's kind of interesting is more and more of the data center providers out there. We have a large number of those in our portfolio. And what's interesting is more and more of those, they build new data centers. They are very green and much more energy efficient than they ever have before. Again, drawing from other energy resources. And so on and so forth. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is more and more cloud companies move into those data centers. One of the things that they can do, which is kind of interesting, is they can use machine learning and AI. Kind of think about like a Nest type thermostat like you have at your house. It kind of figures out, okay, I don't normally go in that room, so therefore I can turn down the temperature here, or I'm normally here certain days, certain times of day and things like that. So the same thing is happening in the data center space where you can kind of figure out peak loads in terms of the use of the virtualized type environments and some of these type of huge type cloud type data center type providers. They kind of figure out, what, we're not using all this cloud compute stuff over on that side. So what we can do is actually automatically sense that and start turning down a lot of those servers, automatically move those workloads that are running here and actually transfer those workloads into a different part of the data center and actually start turning down some of that workloads, again, to save energy, to save costs, things like that. So it's a combination of both. But they're starting to do more and more of that as we move forward down this path, which is kind of cool. The other piece I think we need to kind of talk about from a sustainability perspective is, IBM Watson was one of the first AI type engines we kind of thought about, right? And at first we kind of used it and kind of joked about it. It could kind of beat the best chess players in the world when it finally got to that point, and beat the Jeopardy champion of the time. So it could start doing those fun kind of things, right? But we didn't really see business type needs to begin with. And so I think the other piece from a sustainability is even, certain hospitals and certain health organizations are starting to use things like IBM Watson and other sort of platforms like that to even go out and say, let's fight cancer, or let's look at some other health related issues to help treat patients better and things like that. So doing things in that nature as well that help solve other human type issues is another area we're seeing AI being utilized from a technology perspective that I don't think many of us kind of perceive being able to. It's just the computations it can do in so many seconds. It's just unbelievable now, the amount that's taking place. So it can compute things out much quicker than we can in our human brain. So it's able to handle tasks and do research that we never thought we could do before. So even sustainability from a human race perspective is something that things like IBM Watson is contributing to from an AI perspective. So I thought that was interesting as well as I was doing a little bit of research here. So.
Great insight. I think this dynamic scaling is definitely is very interesting perspective. I think going nest-like idea, I think that's something which, all the solution going forward are going to adapt it, but it's definitely going to help with, sustainability also. When we have this solution which are going to get deployed, obviously they'll scale in, scale out very dynamically. Christensen, thoughts?
Sure. To share some of my thoughts with you, I'm going to start off with a little bit of story and personal history. I started off my career in Bell South, what was known as Bell South at the time. Now it's all part of AT&T in Jacksonville, Florida. And there was a director in the organization that asked everybody a question. And I think I got the answer wrong. Because my background is my undergraduate degree is in industrial engineering, so it's all about efficiency. The question was, what's more important, doing the right thing or doing things right? And so, of course, I said doing things right. But, age and wisdom kind of come together. And the more I thought about it over the years, I think in some respects, doing the right things is more important, because if you think about it, if you're doing the right things, ultimately you can do them right because you're thinking about it more, you're applying efficiencies, technology, and so forth. So I got the answer wrong when I was a 20-something, but now that I'm a 50-something, I can figure these things out. So applying that to sustainability and AI, just sitting here thinking and thinking what Uma is saying and what Gary is saying, I think one of the things that AI could be used for is better policy decisions. One of the things that I think about, I'm sure you guys have heard this before, if aliens landed on the earth and they looked at some of the things that us human beings doing, they'd say, you're crazy. You're obviously not evolved enough. That's why you haven't seen us yet, right? And so, I think of things like cryptocurrency and blockchain. Now, I'm introducing some industry verticals here that are not directly related to telecom, but as we know, telecom supports everything. So blockchain, we know that there's these data centers in Iceland, and they're there because it's really cheap geothermal power, and these data centers use a lot of energy, and all that energy is going into figuring out a cryptographic algorithm so that they can generate a Bitcoin, right? And that's all financially driven. And I won't even get into the reasons why Bitcoin even exists, because, central banks are printing too much money. We all know that, they can print as much money as they want, but there's only 26 million Bitcoins or whatever. So we know why it exists. But then you look at that and you think, well, is that really doing right things right? That train's already left the station, so I don't think we're going to change that. But maybe what we need to look at is, okay, once we start to approach that mythological 26 million Bitcoin, of course, Bitcoin will cost a lot more by the time we get to that point. So if you're investing in Bitcoin, that's what you're hoping for, right? But once you start to reach that asymptote, right, where all of a sudden it gets harder and harder to generate a Bitcoin because it's harder to solve that algorithm, right? Which is why all those data centers are there. But at some point, the data centers are going to be obsolete, And then we got to think about, what are we going to do with those data centers? And then, how do we integrate things like as we start to approach more of a quantum economy? And we know that quantum computing solves certain problems better than traditional computing. So maybe there's going to be hybrid systems. So maybe we use AI to reconcile that. How do we merge quantum computing with traditional computing and use these data centers that are being used for blockchain today? Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about. Another AI policy thing is just looking at renewable energy. One of the things that people don't talk about very often is this concept of embedded energy. There's no free lunch. I mean, sure, once you have a wind-based turbine up there, it takes about 10 years to pay for it. But a lot of people don't like to think about all the embedded energy that goes into making that, all the rare earth materials, all the manufacturing that's required. And, the kind of dirty secret with green energy is it's not so green at the front end of it. If you've ever been to one of those pits where they dig up the lithium and all the rare earths and stuff, it's pretty ugly. It's one of those not my backyard kind of things. But we certainly enjoy the free energy. So, I'm not bringing these controversial topics up to muddy the waters here and the discussion, but just to stimulate thought. Maybe we use AI to make better policy decisions, so those aliens might visit us sooner, perhaps. So that's something that I'd like to raise as part of the conversation.
Thanks, Christian. So all the way from measuring it right to dynamic scaling and policy, I think that there are lots of room here to actually go and contribute to better sustainability. We all are in this telecom, and coincidentally, currently we don't have any chatbot in this panel discussion. It's a good thing, I would say. So it's all about being human, and we need to bring that human touch, right? So the AIs are there, and all the statistics still shows that AI will not go alone. There is always going to be a hybrid model, at least as of today, that it will be an assisted AI. How we are going to, just keep on ensuring that there is a human touch involved, right? For example, Davis, when you're talking about, this auto scripting and, it needs to understand your mood, or even when we are talking with Alexa or Siri, and it needs to understand that tone and revert accordingly. I think there's a lot. So how we as a telco are going to work in the space of bringing more human touch, bringing more AI in this collaboration. Uma, if you would like to go and give your
Yeah, of course.
thoughts.
I think the AI and machine learning, if you look at every single industry, it's there in some form or shape, right? Every one of us is interacting with a chatbot or some kind of non-human kind of processes in day-to-day in our life. And it has impacted the business in many positive ways as well, right? There's definitely benefits both from financial perspective and experience perspective in that, and even the making life simpler, right? It has contributed a lot in all the industries. But I personally believe that machines will never replace the humans, right? Like we talked about, there's always play a higher level role for a human being, no matter how autonomous the AI is able to make the processes, right? It changes our life and interactions, but there's always like a different role that the human players are going to take. And also, if you think about a couple of years ago, people were really, it caused some fear in job loss across the industries as well, right? Like, what is this AI? Is it going to replace? As the companies are looking at the cost cuttings and making it more profitable, right? But Ruthless suggests that any sector, right, especially the STEM kind of sectors, AI simply cannot replace because of the same reason we are talking here, right? The creativity, intuition, the experience, and all that is really, it's not perfected, and I don't think we'll get there. With AI, it's clear that our role as humans will shift rather than disappear. That's the key message, right? It's going to shift, so we have to adapt. We have to reinvent ourselves with the new skills, and also we need to think about integrating humans with AI. That is the new kind of outlook, right? Which is going to change our roles and which is going to change how we think about it and our skill sets and talent, but it doesn't disappear. So the companies should really focus on how to tap into that AI capabilities to improve even their employee experiences, right? Look for how to offer the flexibility and better job satisfaction and use AI in a positive way. And also we need to prepare our workforce and our communities eventually transition to an AI-driven economy. So we need to recalibrate what are the jobs as we transition to that, right? How do we train our next generation to be ready for that and coexist and integrate with that AI-driven, intelligent kind of environment? So the future looks brighter with AI and human coming together, but it's a different world, though.
Oh yes, Uma. I mean, this is going to be like like an industrial revolution when we brought in machineries. The change is something which obviously always get resisted, and that's something we need to get adapting. And rightly said, integrating with humans or to bring in better satisfaction. I think this whole the work for the next generation is going to change, and they would be expecting more from the AI, and certain things are expected, out of the box. So, like almost a decade back, when I was in one of the conferences, there was a video presented when a kid was shown. This is actually almost 2 decades back. A kid was shown, first flipping the book, but then there is a next kid is shown sitting on a kind of iPad and just flipping it and expecting it to move. That became a reality. So the more and more we go ahead, the AI will become very much norm, and it will definitely need to add value there, and it will be expected also. Christensen, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. AI is embedded in so many things that we already implicitly rely on it without even realizing it. But it's very monolithic in nature. It's very specific as opposed to general purpose, but ultimately it will be general purpose. I'm a big fan of augmenting human intelligence with AI and vice versa, but I don't mean like the AI brain interface. You're going to have to strap me down to do that kind of surgery. I'm not. I don't want that world. Although there is some AI that can help your body, like maybe regulating your heart and things like that. But I want to do my own thinking assisted with AI and vice versa. And AI is not yet sentient. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have intuition. I don't know at what point we're going to have that mythological singularity where it gets there. And hopefully we don't have that Terminator scenario happen that people talk about. But I will tell you this, though, augmenting AI with human intelligence is something that we do at UMail. And in fact, again, I think of Gary Davis and the call center. And, I don't know if we're blocking any of those calls. Maybe we are. But one of the things that we're very careful to do is only block the calls that we should block. And sometimes it takes a human being to figure that out. We can have the machine determine that it's a robocall, and we can have the machine give us some inference as to whether it could be an unwanted robocall. But oftentimes it takes a human being to look at it and figure out, is that somebody pretending to be Wells Fargo, or is that really a robocall that Wells Fargo is making? Because, there are some commercial entities that do that. And so that's one of the things that we struggle with. And AI is not really good at that yet. AI is not good at figuring out, is that brand impersonation, or is that something that we know? Now, once we curate something, we create a digital fingerprint, then AI machine learning is really good at doing things at scale. So again, that comes back to my notion of I like the idea of AI and human beings working together. But if you're solely relying on AI for binary outcomes, sometimes those outcomes are not what you want to have happen. We talk about sometimes the hive mind type of a thing that we might get to with things like autonomous vehicles. And so, yeah, it might be good for AI to swerve to have you avoid running into a parked semi. But if the hive mind happens and it determines maybe it's good to get rid of Jerry because we save a school bus, Jerry might not like that so much, right? So again, I'm a sentient being, so I can have feelings, but AI doesn't care. It's just going to do the greater good, right? So there's definitely a lot of things to think about as we advance into the future. But I would say as long as we're careful And as I mentioned earlier, perhaps use AI to think of some policy enhancements and not just doing things better, but doing the right things. That's what I would be a fan of.
No, thank you, Christian. So AI is, again, all about probability, right? I mean, it never gives you a binary answer. It's just going to tell you what is the probability, and based on that probability, we end up setting up the whole, be it operation or be it any intelligence, and that probability, we as a human can take some cautious call, and that something won't be possible with AI, at least in near future. They are definitely going to improve day by day, but then there is a limit. So, Davis, I mean, how do you see human touch coming in on the AI arena?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I think we're seeing more and more of the human touch being added, into the AI type algorithms. Man, I think we're starting to see things like being able to judge sentiment and kind of figure out what I'm thinking a little bit better, not just, what my mood is, things like that, beyond just what my words say, right? The whole fuzzy logic and understanding, that I can be sarcastic and say one thing, but yet mean something completely different. So it's, again, learning those experiences that we have as a human being. And I'm kind of reminded, those that may be familiar with the movie Matrix, for instance. You brought up the Terminator. I'll bring up Matrix, which is another sci-fi movie. But the premise, of course, for those that may not be familiar with the movie, Keanu Reeves is out there as a guy named Neo. And bottom line is the machines have taken over the earth, right? It's scorched the sky where now it's machine versus man, the whole sort of concept there. And one of the things in that movie at one point, the leader of the free world, so to speak, on the human side is down there, and so is Neo, Keanu Reeves. And they're looking at this machine down there that's creating oxygen and doing all these things inside of Zion, this place way under earth, right? And what's kind of interesting is the conversation that took place. And this is kind of where I knew kind of the ending of the movie kind of right there when he talked about this in the second movie. And the thing was, it went back and forth. Well, yeah, but we got machines down here, but yet we're fighting machines out there. What's the difference? And Keanu Reeves said, well, I don't understand your point. And he's like, well, I'm too old, don't really make points anymore. And well, but we're in control, right? We could unplug these. And he's like, yeah, sure, we could unplug it, but it'd make our life miserable. We couldn't do it and enjoy life the way we could, like we can today. But at the end of the day, bottom line is, we can use machines, we can use AI, just like, we also need human beings to have the interface as well. And I think all of us have been there, right? Anytime we're in society, we still want that human touch, that human element. Even today, we're on video. We're not listening to a conference call, for instance. We want that image. We want that human touch as human beings. And so, we've done that with a lot of our technologies. I don't care if we just automatically assume we're going to Zoom a call now and do a video conference, especially given COVID and the lack of travel and things like that for the past several years. So that's definitely, there's need to be a balance there, right? It's scheduling, and making sure that there is a human touch along with the artificial intelligence. The two combined is what makes us special. I think all of us, we've called into an IVR of some sort, right? We've called into a contact center. And I call it IVR purgatory. I mean, we get in there, we press numbers, we say things, it doesn't understand us. And what do? We just get super, super frustrated. We try and hit zero, try and loop out of it eventually to get to a real human being. And then a lot of times now it doesn't let us, and then we have to try this. Sometimes we hang back up, try different things to say and all that kind of good stuff. So I think at the end of the day, it's about a balance. I talk a lot with sales partners today as they try and sell a lot of different services, including things like contact centers. And we, in contact center world, we're doing a lot of chat bots and virtual agents, and we're doing a lot of things to automate, to eliminate human beings in some cases. But I always warn and caution different sales partners, as companies go down that path, there needs to be that natural balance there. Balance of human beings. We still want a human being sometimes to do some of the things we need. And we want to be able to talk to them. We want the empathy associated with that human being on the other side of the phone. So again, there's a natural balance. And I think that's really the big thing is, as Jerry Christian talked about, and Uma talked about as well, it's all about balance moving forward and making sure that, yes, AI can help control, help make sure that we do things very effectively and efficiently. But at the same time, we still want that human touch. We need to combine that with human beings to make sure we deliver the service, the overall customer experience increases that we talked about in the beginning stages of this particular panel. So with that, that's all I got. So.
Yeah, thanks, Davis. I think there's one clear message which is emerging here is that the coexistence is something inevitable, and rightly said, Davis. I would not deny that I have not Googled certain vendors to figure out how do I reach human and not just some IVR. So that coexistence would be needed. That AI part of the mechanism also need to improve further to bring in that human touch, right? So with that, I think we are almost reaching the end of the discussion. Anyone else having, if you would want to have any closing comments, Davis?
I would like to add a comment
Yeah.
to that coexistence of human and AI. I think the intelligence there is understanding the preference, right? Like me as a customer, sometimes I would like to just go into the chatbot or the virtual assistant and get the things done because I know exactly what to do. I'm not looking for a human kind of interaction there. It's the convenience, right? And some of the time that's not the case, right? I really want to talk to the human being to understand somebody can handhold me and give me the guidance. So it is the very sophisticated kind of approach we need to take in order to balance that, right? It's not like you can route certain customers to certain channel. It's really certain customers that for certain needs, for certain time of the day or day of the week, right? So there's a lot of intelligence that need to build and that needs to be like trained. The other thing we talked about was, and Gary Christensen, you brought this up, right? Most of the things we have today is a point solution. And the next decade, hopefully, is about scaling the AI. And that's where some of the things we talked about is critical for every organization to think about, right? The sustainability and responsible AI as we scale, because most of the things are either pilots or solution for certain algorithm or problem. But when you transform an organization or a society with AI, then we are talking about a scale, which we need to be responsible.
Thanks, Uma. Christensen or Davis, if you would like to have any other closing comments.
Yeah, I'll just mention real quick, one of the things that I think an important point, we talked about customer experience and AI and a lot of the different areas and how to make money and all these kind of good things. But at the end of the day, I think one of the things that we need to kind of consider it, and I think, Uma, you brought this up as well, just a reminder, I teach sales partners every single day that sell some of these solutions that it's not always about the TCO, it's not always about the return on investment, but rather it's about unlocking new potential that they may not have known was possible. As an engineer type, as a pre-sale engineer, I talk a lot about the art of what's possible. And so teaching customers what maybe they don't already know, how to maybe reinvent their businesses and add additional services and capabilities they didn't even know were possible before. So again, before the likes of a Spotify, for instance, who thought you wanted to have automatically kind of to know, or an Amazon to automatically kind of figure out what I wanted and actually send me emails or pop up with ads and things, or have a custom experience inside of Facebook, for instance, that automatically knows what kind of ads, what kind of content I want to be delivered, or inside of YouTube. So again, those are all new businesses that if you simply looked at a return on investment, you would have never done it. I think one of the things I remember, Steve Jobs talked about at Apple as being the founder. And one of the things that as they ousted him, one of the things they forgot was he wasn't simply looking at numbers and zeros, dollars and cents. He was looking more at the future, building something that was different than anybody else had built before. And I think that's one of the things that as we look at selling AI type product sets, it's not always about numbers and dollars, but rather it's about what the art of what's possible and changing the organizations internally that way. So again, just again, a reminder for those looking at AI, those customers out there, again, it's not always about the dollars and cents, but rather about what you can actually build and what you can accomplish with the new technology. So,
imagine impossible. I think that's the mantra here. Christensen.
Yeah, so one final thought that I'd like to maybe wrap things up with here is a personal wish of mine for AI in the future. I'd really like to have personalized AI. And by that, I mean, I wrote a report a few years ago, and I referred to something that I called the watcher function. And so that would be AI that is personalized to the individual or the group or the company, where it kind of watches out for your own best interests. Because if you think about it, when AI is programmed, then it is really just a software program carrying out executions, and if machine learning is in place, it's learning from that and adapting that, but it's still very much prescriptive in some respects. It's an organization that's writing software to execute certain things at scale. And those things that happen with AI are not always in your best interest. So one of the things that I'd like to personally have is the ability to have my own preferences for how I, as a human being, interact with everything in my everyday life, and have my own personalized AI to be able to look out for my best interests and interact with other AI systems. And that could be everything from that extreme example I mentioned earlier with that hive mind decision to avoid the school bus, to even just basic everyday things, those annoying robocalls. Maybe we have semantic communications in the future where, Jerry knows to answer the call because maybe it's something to do with fly fishing, right? But if somebody's trying to sell me clothes, my wife could answer that because she's more interested in that maybe, that kind of thing. So that's my wish list for AI for the future, is make it truly more personalized, but let the individual drive those decisions. That's my hope.
Assisted AI, I think, a very personalized assisted AI, that would be the way to go. And there's some funny videos out there, having Siri talk with Alexa. I think should watch sometime. It will be more fun, at least for now, and eventually it will evolve. Nitin, I'm not sure if you can hear us, if you would like to add any further comments.
Yes, yes, Karthik. It was a great discussion, so I thoroughly enjoyed it, and hope the audience also would have enjoyed it. We'll have 15 seconds left for the audience. They can type in the Q&A section if they have any questions to ask.
I think it's the first question is always the difficult one.
Okay. Well.
All right, it's fine. I think. Thank you, everyone. I think.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, the panelists. I really appreciate appreciate the time you invested for us. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again sometime, and maybe in person. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Have a nice.
Bye-bye.